The room smelled like lavender and antiseptic, which is a combination that shouldn't work, but somehow does. The way hospitals try to convince you they're somewhere pleasant. I was staring at a popcorn ceiling when I realized I had no idea how I'd gotten there. I sat up slowly, the way you do when you're not sure your body is going to cooperate. Everything worked. No pain, no fog, no weakness. The bed was clean, but foreign. The window showed a parking lot I didn't recognize, and a tree line in the distance that wasn't mine. Through the wall, I could hear a television playing a game show at low volume, and underneath that, the soft shuffle of someone walking the corridor in rubber-soled shoes. "Hello?" My voice came out rougher than I expected. A woman in pale blue scrubs appeared in the doorway almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. She was maybe 40, with a lanyard that bounced when she moved. "Mr. Holloway, good morning. How are you feeling?" "Where am I?" She smiled in that particular way that people smile when they've been trained to smile. "Meadow Ridge Residential Care. You've been with us 4 days now." 4 days. I turned that over in my mind, the way you test ice before you step onto it. 4 days I couldn't account for. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I don't belong here. Your daughter signed all the intake paperwork. She said you'd been having some difficulties at home." "What kind of difficulties?" "She can explain better than I can." The smile again, softer this time. "Are you hungry? Breakfast is still available." I wasn't hungry. I was 68 years old, a retired electrical contractor who'd spent 35 years running a company, managed a crew of 14 at my peak, wired commercial buildings and schools and a regional hospital. I did not have difficulties. I had, 3 weeks ago or so, had a bout of vertigo that lasted about 40 minutes. My daughter had insisted I see a doctor. The doctor had prescribed something for the dizziness and told me to take it easy. That was the last thing I remembered clearly. "Can I call my daughter?" I asked. "Of course. Let me get you a phone." She brought me a phone from the nursing station, a cordless landline that felt like I'd traveled back to 2003. My smartphone wasn't in the room. When I asked about my belongings, a different staff member brought a small bin, my wallet, my watch, the pocket knife I'd carried for 20 years. No phone, no keys. My daughter answered on the second ring. "Dad, how do you feel?" "Confused," I said. "Why am I in a care facility?" A pause. Not a surprise pause. A prepared one. "You weren't safe at home anymore. You were having episodes. The doctor said you needed supervised care." "What episodes?" "I had vertigo once." "Dad, it was more than once. You left the garage door open overnight. You called me 4 times in one evening asking when your mother was coming home." Her voice dropped, gentle, in a way that felt rehearsed. "Mom's been gone 3 years, Dad." "I know that." And I did. I knew it completely. My wife, Carol, had passed from a stroke 3 years and 2 months ago. I could tell you the date. I could tell you what we'd had for dinner the night before she collapsed, what she'd been laughing about. "I haven't called, looking for your mother." The doctor documented everything. Which doctor? Not Dr. Fallon. I've seen Tom Fallon for 16 years. Another pause. Someone Dr. Warren recommended. A specialist. Dr. Warren. That was my daughter's boyfriend. He wasn't a doctor himself, but he talked about doctors the way some people talk about restaurants. Always had a recommendation. Always knew someone. He'd come into my daughter's life about 8 months ago, smooth and attentive and full of ideas about financial planning, which was how they'd met, apparently. He ran an investment advisory firm. He'd been very interested in discussing my retirement accounts. "I want to come home," I said. "The doctor says you're not ready. The doctor doesn't know me." "Dad," her voice caught just slightly. "I'm trying to take care of you. Please let me." She told me she'd visit soon and that I should rest. Then she was gone. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time, looking at the parking lot through the window. The vertigo was gone. My thoughts were clear and sequential. I could name all 4 of my grandchildren, recite my contractor's license number, calculate the materials cost for a standard commercial panel installation in my head without effort. There was nothing wrong with me. Something, though, was very wrong. I started paying attention the way I used to pay attention on job sites, where missing something could mean someone getting hurt. The staff were professional and kind, but this was not a place for people who were well. My neighbors on the corridor were deep in dementia or recovering from strokes, or simply too frail to be anywhere else. The activities posted on the wall, bingo, gentle chair yoga, a movie hour, were designed for people with profound limitations. I also noticed the medications. Every morning at 7, a cart came around. I took what I was given. I was still working out what I was capable of pushing back on. On the third day, my neighbor from back home, a retired postal worker named Ted, who had been my wife's friend before he was mine, appeared in my doorway holding a paper bag of oranges. He looked at me like I was a ghost. Frank. He stepped inside and shut the door partially behind him. Frank, what in the hell? Sit down, Ted. Your daughter told me you'd had a stroke, that you were somewhere in Pennsylvania. I called 4 facilities before I found this one. Pennsylvania? I was in Pennsylvania. I lived in Western Virginia. I'd been moved across a state line without knowing it. I need your help, I said. I kept my voice even because the situation required it. I need you to do some things without telling my daughter or Dr. Warren. Can you do that? Ted was 71 and had not trusted people easily since his second marriage. He pulled his chair closer and leaned forward. Tell me everything, he said. I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much, and everything I suspected, which was more than I wanted it to be. My daughter had come back to town 8 months ago after her second divorce. She'd been struggling financially. Dr. Warren had arrived in her life 6 weeks after that. He was charming, well-dressed, and specifically curious about my situation, my house, my pension, what I'd saved, what I'd built. 2 months ago, he'd suggested I move my retirement investments into a consolidated wealth management account through his firm. I'd declined. I was comfortable with my current broker, a woman I'd worked with for a decade. The accounts were in good shape. I didn't need restructuring. 6 weeks ago, during a dinner at my daughter's apartment, I'd had the vertigo episode. It hit me without warning, a spinning sensation and sudden nausea. I'd sat down. Doctor? Warren had been very calm, very helpful. He'd called someone. A doctor had come to the apartment rather than an emergency room, which had struck me as unusual, but I hadn't been in a position to argue. The doctor had given me something. An injection, he said, to stabilize me. After that, my memory got soft at the edges. I think I was drugged, I told Ted. He didn't flinch. What do you need me to do? I asked him to check my investment accounts. He had my broker's number from a time I'd added him as an emergency contact years ago, a bureaucratic detail I'd forgotten and was now grateful for. He came back the next morning. Frank. He sat down and folded his hands on his knees, in the way that men of his generation do when they have hard news. There are transfer requests pending on 3 of your accounts, authorized 2 weeks ago, transferring to a wealth management firm called Warren Capital Group. Warren Capital Group. The total pending transfer was $460,000. My daughter came to visit 4 days after I'd called her, arriving with Dr. Warren beside her. I hadn't seen him before, only heard about him. He was 51 or 52, well-built, with the kind of tan you get from golf courses rather than honest work. He smiled when he walked into my room like he was doing me a favor. Mr. Holloway, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. I'm sure you have, I said. My daughter looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her. She hugged me quickly, carefully, in the way you hug someone you're not sure of. You look better, Dad. You have some color. I feel fine. I've felt fine this entire time. The doctors say you're making progress. Which doctors? I'd like their names. Dr. Warren sat down without being invited. Mr. Holloway, I understand this is disorienting. It's actually very common for patients in the early stages of cognitive decline to feel like there's been a mistake. The brain protects itself from that awareness. I'm an electrician, not a neurologist, I said. But that sounds like the kind of thing someone says when they want you to stop asking questions. His smile stayed exactly where it was. I just want you to focus on getting better. Your daughter and I are handling everything else. The investment accounts. A small pause. We're making sure your assets are protected and well managed while you're getting care. By transferring them to your company, by consolidating them into a structure that makes sense given your current situation. My daughter looked at the floor. What is my current situation? Exactly, I asked. Dad, please don't do this. I'm asking a simple question. Doctor. Warren leaned forward, elbows on knees, and used the voice that people use when they want to seem reasonable right before they tell you something unreasonable. You have early-stage dementia, Mr. Holloway. The independent psychiatric evaluation confirmed it. Your daughter was appointed your legal guardian 6 days ago. It was necessary. You weren't safe. I'd like to see the psychiatric evaluation. It's with our attorney, and the guardianship documents. Also with our attorney? I've never met an independent psychiatrist, I said. No one has administered any tests. No one has asked me anything beyond my name and whether I know the date. Dad. My daughter's voice broke slightly. He loves you. He's trying to help. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was 42 years old and she'd had a hard decade. 2 marriages that had come apart. A business venture that hadn't worked. Years of financial stress. She wanted someone to solve things. She'd found someone who seemed like he could. And he'd pointed her at me. I know you believe that, I said to her. Not to him. We'll talk soon. After they left, I asked the staff member on duty for one thing. I wanted an independent medical evaluation, not from any doctor connected to my daughter's care team. I wanted a geriatric specialist of the facility's choosing, based on nothing except their own professional judgment. The facility's medical director, to her credit, agreed without argument. The evaluation happened over 2 days. A geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Elaine Porter drove in from a hospital 60 miles away. She spent 4 hours with me across 2 sessions. Memory assessments, executive function tests, processing speed evaluations, a full cognitive battery. She also ordered a comprehensive blood panel. On the morning of the 3rd day, she sat across from me with her notes on her lap. Mr. Holloway, you're in the 89th percentile for your age group on overall cognitive function. Your memory is excellent. Your processing speed is somewhat below peak, which is entirely normal at 68. You show no signs of dementia, early or otherwise. Then why am I here? She held my gaze. The blood panel found residual traces of lorazepam. Not a dose you'd have today, but consistent with repeated dosing over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. Lorazepam at sustained doses causes memory gaps, confusion, and impaired judgment. You were never prescribed it. Someone gave it to me. Someone gave it to you. I thought about the dinner at my daughter's apartment, the vertigo hitting without warning. The doctor who arrived at the apartment and gave me an injection to stabilize me. The medications the staff here had been giving me every morning that I hadn't been in a position to refuse. What does this mean? I asked. It means, she said carefully, that the medical basis for this guardianship is fraudulent. You have no cognitive impairment. You were chemically impaired, and that impairment was used to justify a legal process that should never have been initiated. She paused. Mr. Holloway, whoever initiated this committed fraud. You need a lawyer. Ted had already found one. Her name was Diana Okafor. She drove up from Richmond because her specialty was elder financial exploitation, a practice area that she'd built after watching what had happened to her own grandfather 15 years earlier. She was 54, direct, and arrived with a leather folio that she opened before she'd fully sat down. Tell me everything. Start from before the vertigo episode. I did. She took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for about 10 seconds. The investment transfers haven't cleared yet, she said. They've been flagged by your brokerage's fraud detection system because the amounts exceeded your typical transfer threshold. The transfers are frozen pending review. That buys us time. How much time? Enough. The guardianship was granted on an emergency basis, which means it was granted with minimal scrutiny. Emergency guardianships are designed for genuine crises, stroke patients, severe accidents, not as a mechanism for asset transfer. When the judge sees Dr. Porter's evaluation, the guardianship falls. When it falls, the transfer authorizations signed during the guardianship period fall with it. He'll fight it. He will. That's what I'm here for. She closed her folio. Mr. Holloway, do you want to know how Dr. Warren found you? I hadn't asked, but I realized I should have. Your daughter isn't the first family member he's targeted. 2 years ago in North Carolina, he went through the same sequence with a woman whose elderly father had substantial savings. He identified her through a financial wellness seminar he runs. He presents himself as a community-minded financial advisor. He gets close to the adult child. He gets introduced to the parent. He waits for an opportunity, or he creates one. She looked at me steadily. The North Carolina case settled out of court. The family didn't want the exposure. The father had died by the time the case resolved. Dr. Warren moved to Virginia. I sat with that for a moment. Does my daughter know any of this? I asked. I don't believe so, she said. But she participated in it, whether she understood what she was participating in or not. The emergency hearing to challenge the guardianship was set for 8 days later. Dr. Warren's attorney filed 2 motions to delay it. Both denied. The judge, a woman in her 60s named the Honorable Margaret Stiles, had a reputation for impatience with procedural obstruction. Ted drove me to the courthouse. I'd been released from Meadow Ridge the day after Dr. Porter submitted her evaluation, the medical director having concluded with some visible discomfort that the facility had been deceived. They'd taken me in on documentation that appeared legitimate. They hadn't known. I believed them. My daughter and Dr. Warren sat at the respondent's table with their attorney, a man in a charcoal suit who shuffled papers with practiced confidence. Dr. Warren had his investment advisor posture. Relaxed, pleasant, giving off the impression that he was doing everyone a favor by being present. Diana stood up first. She presented Dr. Porter's evaluation. She presented the toxicology results. She presented the timeline, the vertigo episode, the apartment dinner, the injection, the paperwork filed during the period when I was being chemically impaired. The transfer request to Warren Capital Group initiated within days of the guardianship being granted. She presented the documentation from the North Carolina case. Then she asked Dr. Warren's attorney whether his client would like to take the stand voluntarily. He declined. So Diana called my daughter instead. My daughter sat in the witness box and looked at her hands. When did your father first mention having memory problems? Diana asked. About 3 months ago. He told you he was having memory problems? He seemed confused sometimes. He'd repeat himself. Did you document any of these instances? Write them down? Record them? Anything like that? A pause. No. Did you consult your father's long-term physician, Dr. Thomas Fallon, about these concerns? We felt it was better to get a second opinion from a specialist. The specialist being a physician you met through Dr. Warren? He was recommended to us. How long have you known Dr. Warren? About 8 months. And when did he first discuss your father's financial situation with you? Her attorney objected. Judge Stiles overruled it. I don't remember exactly, my daughter said. Your father has approximately $600,000 in retirement assets, correct? I think so. Dr. Warren's firm specializes in wealth management for high net worth individuals. Yes. Did Dr. Warren, at any point before the guardianship filing, propose managing your father's accounts? My daughter's hands tightened in her lap. He mentioned it. And your father declined? Yes. And 6 weeks after that declination, your father had a health episode at your apartment, was seen by a physician connected to Dr. Warren, and was subsequently transferred to a care facility in another state without regaining consciousness first. He was having an episode. We were scared. Did you call 911? Silence. Did you call your father's personal physician, Dr. Fallon? Silence. Did you call an ambulance? My daughter's chin dropped. No. Why not? Dr. Warren said it would be faster to call someone he knew. Someone he knew. Diana let that land for a moment. Did you read the guardianship paperwork before you signed it? He explained it to me. That's not what I asked. Did you read it? Some of it. The petition states that your father had been observed leaving his home without shoes on 3 occasions, that he'd been found confused and disoriented by neighbors twice, and that he had expressed suicidal ideation. Were you aware that those claims were in the document you signed? My daughter looked up sharply. What? Were you aware? No. Her voice had changed. Something had shifted behind her eyes. That's not he never. None of that is true. No, Diana said. None of it is. Dr. Warren's attorney tried to recover during his cross, but the thread had already come loose. He asked my daughter whether she genuinely believed she was acting in her father's interests. She said yes, quietly and without conviction. He asked whether Dr. Warren had access to the guardianship filing before she signed it. She hesitated for 2 full seconds. He drafted it, she said. He said he was helping me with the paperwork. When Dr. Warren finally took the stand, the judge had requested it directly. Diana stood about 6 feet from him and spoke in a tone I would describe as quietly thorough. Dr. Warren Capital Group is registered as an investment advisory firm. You personally hold a Series 65 license. Is that correct? That's correct. Your license has been active in Virginia for 14 months. Before that, it was active in North Carolina for about 2 years. And before that, in Georgia for 3 years. You've moved your registration 3 times in 7 years? I go where business opportunities are. In North Carolina, a complaint was filed against you by the family of an elderly man whose investment assets were transferred to your firm under a guardianship arrangement that was subsequently challenged in civil court. That matter was settled. In your favor? A pause. It was settled. You received a settlement payment? Yes. The elderly man had died before the case was resolved? Regrettably, yes. And you moved to Virginia 4 months after that settlement was finalized? I'd been considering the move for some time. How did you meet this defendant's daughter? At a financial wellness seminar I host. A seminar marketed specifically to adults managing finances for aging parents? Dr. Warren adjusted in his seat. It covers a range of financial planning topics. It's marketed as, and I'm reading from your own website, a practical guide for adult children navigating the complex financial responsibilities of supporting aging loved ones. Correct? That's one way to describe it. It's the way you describe it. Diana set down the printout. When did you first learn that her father had approximately $600,000 in retirement assets? I don't recall. According to your firm's records, which we've subpoenaed, a prospect file was opened on Richard Frank Holloway. That's this man. Sitting right there 6 weeks before your client's vertigo episode. Is that correct? A longer pause. We open prospect files on potential clients regularly. This file contained his asset summary, his broker's contact information, the approximate value of his home, and notes describing him as resistant to restructuring. Who wrote those notes? I manage my own files. So you did know about his assets before he ever agreed to meet with you. I was doing due diligence as part of financial planning discussions. You were building a file on a man who hadn't hired you yet, whose assets you were planning to access through his daughter before he'd had any cognitive episodes. Dr. Warren's attorney objected. The judge noted the objection and told Diana to rephrase. Had your client ever agreed to work with your firm? Diana asked. Not formally. Had he declined? He expressed hesitation. He said no. He expressed hesitation. Judge Stiles removed her reading glasses. The witness will answer the question as posed. Did Mr. Holloway decline to transfer his assets to your firm? Dr. Warren looked at the judge. Yes. Then why did the transfer requests go through? The guardianship authorized my client to act on her father's behalf. A guardianship that was based on a fraudulent medical evaluation, false claims in the petition, and the deliberate chemical impairment of a man who was, and remains, cognitively sound. The judge set her glasses on the bench. I've heard enough. The guardianship was dissolved that afternoon. The judge also referred the matter to the district attorney's office and to the state financial regulatory authority. She froze all assets of Warren Capital Group pending investigation. Walking out of the courthouse, I heard Dr. Warren's voice behind me, low and careful, directed at his attorney. He was talking about appeal timelines and evidentiary standards, and the word manageable used in a way I didn't like. Then I heard my daughter. She'd stopped in the corridor, and Dr. Warren had turned back to wait for her, and she was looking at him with an expression I'd seen on her face only once before, when her first husband had told her something that broke something inside her. It was the expression of someone understanding something they'd been working very hard not to understand. "The suicidal ideation," she said to him. "You wrote that. We needed the petition to be strong enough to. You wrote that my father had expressed suicidal ideation. My father," her voice was very controlled. "He never said anything like that. You made that up and you put my name on it. It was a legal formality." "It didn't. I signed a document that said my father wanted to kill himself. That was a lie, and you put my name on it." Dr. Warren's attorney stepped in quietly. My daughter stepped back. She found me outside on the courthouse steps, where Ted was standing with his coat collar up against a November wind. She looked like she'd been running, though she hadn't been. "Dad." She stopped 3 feet from me. I waited. "I didn't know about the petition," she said. "What he wrote in it. I swear to you." "I know. I thought he told me you needed care. He showed me things that looked like documentation. He said the accounts were just being protected." I believed him. She stopped. I wanted to believe him. I wanted someone to have it figured out. "I'm so sorry." I looked at my daughter. I had known her for 42 years. I had walked her to her first day of kindergarten and sat beside her when her mother died and driven through a snowstorm to pick her up from her second divorce because she'd called crying and I hadn't hesitated for a single second. She was not a bad person. She was a tired person who had been found by someone who specialized in finding tired people. "I love you," I said. "I will always love you, but I need you to understand what happened, not just to me, but what you were part of, even without knowing it fully." An old man was drugged. He was taken across a state line without his consent. Someone tried to steal the money he spent 35 years building, and they used you to do it. She started crying. "I need time," I said. "Not forever, but time." She nodded. She couldn't speak. Ted drove me home. My house was still standing, which sounds like a small thing unless you've spent 8 months worrying that it wouldn't be. Everything was where I'd left it, because my daughter hadn't cleared it out the way the narrative might have gone in a different story. She wasn't that person. What she'd been was confused and lonely and manipulated, which is different, even if the damage overlapped. I went into the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee and stood at the window while it brewed and looked at the backyard that Carol and I had planted in the spring of 1998. The oak tree we'd put in was now 30 feet tall. I could still remember the way it looked the first spring, a stick with ambitions. The criminal case moved forward over the following months with a speed that surprised me. The district attorney had an investigator who specialized in financial elder abuse, and she'd seen the North Carolina case, which had left a paper trail that Dr. Warren apparently believed a state line would hide. It didn't. He was charged with elder financial exploitation, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unlawful administration of a controlled substance that last one for what the apartment doctor had injected me with the night of the vertigo episode. The apartment doctor, whose license had been on probation in 2 previous states, accepted a plea arrangement and testified in detail about the night in question and about the 4 other times over the preceding 2 weeks he had provided Dr. Warren with lorazepam under circumstances he had chosen not to examine too closely. He'd been paid in cash and was cooperative in a way that suggested he understood he was not the primary target. My daughter was not charged. The DA's office concluded she'd been deceived rather than a willing participant. She agreed to testify at trial, which she did, sitting in the witness box for an entire afternoon and answering questions about how she'd met Dr. Warren, what he'd told her, what he'd promised her, and what she'd believed. She was credible because she was truthful. Whatever else had happened between us, she was not a liar. His attorney tried the usual approaches. He questioned my cognitive reliability on the night of the vertigo episode. He suggested I'd agreed, in my impaired state, to have my daughter manage my affairs, and that the paperwork simply reflected that wish. He pointed to the North Carolina settlement as evidence that his client had done nothing legally actionable there, and therefore the pattern that the prosecution kept referencing wasn't a pattern, just a coincidence of geography. The jury didn't find this persuasive. They came back in 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Dr. Warren stood very still when the verdict was read. which I noted because a man who's been running the same con for 7 years has usually built up a certain immunity to consequences. He'd spent years finding the gaps in systems and sliding through them. He'd counted on families not wanting exposure, on elderly victims being considered unreliable witnesses, on the complexity of financial fraud discouraging prosecutors who had more straightforward cases waiting. He hadn't counted on me being cognitively intact enough to notice what was happening. He hadn't counted on Ted driving 600 miles on a hunch. He hadn't counted on Diana Okafor, who specialized in exactly this situation, and had been waiting for a case like his for a long time. He was sentenced to 7 years. When they let him out of the courtroom, he didn't look at me. I'd half expected him to. There's a thing people like him do sometimes. A final glance to see if they've rattled you, to take something even in defeat. He didn't bother. Maybe he was already calculating his next move inside, or maybe he'd finally run out of calculations. I didn't need to know which. After sentencing, I sat in the courtroom for a few minutes after most people had left. Ted sat beside me. We didn't talk. Outside the tall windows, November had moved into December, and the light was thin and pale and honest. 3 weeks later, my daughter called and asked if she could come for Christmas. I said yes. She arrived with a bottle of wine she couldn't really afford, and a box of the almond cookies she used to make with her mother, and a look on her face like she was walking onto ice she wasn't sure about. She'd ended things with Dr. Warren the afternoon of the emergency hearing, which she told me without being asked, and which I acknowledged without making it into anything larger than it was. We cooked dinner together the way we used to when she was in her 20s and would come home for holidays. She asked about the oak tree Carol had planted. We talked about her mother for a while, which we hadn't done properly in some time, and that was good for both of us. We didn't talk about what had happened, not directly, not that night. We'd have those conversations. There was time. But trust isn't a light switch. You don't flip it back on because the circumstances have changed. Trust is built over time, and it's damaged over time, and it recovers, if it recovers, over time. I loved my daughter. I would always love my daughter. What I was going to do was move forward carefully and honestly, which is different from pretending nothing had happened, and different again from holding what happened over her forever. After she left that evening, I stood on the front porch for a while, in the cold, just breathing. 6 months after I'd woken up in that room in Pennsylvania, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize, I was standing in my own yard, in front of my own house, with my name on the deed and my accounts intact and my mind clear. My investment accounts were exactly where they'd always been, managed by the broker I'd worked with for a decade, because the transfers had been frozen in time and reversed in court, and every digital footprint Dr. Warren had left in those systems had been documented and submitted as evidence. People ask me sometimes whether I should have been more forgiving earlier, whether pressing criminal charges was too severe, whether it was harsh to spend months in litigation rather than letting it be resolved quietly, whether I was too hard on my daughter. My answer is always the same. I was drugged without my consent. I was transported across a state line without my knowledge. A man spent 6 months mapping my life, identifying what I'd built and what I'd worked for, and who in my family he could use to reach it. He chose my daughter not randomly but strategically, specifically because she was lonely and financially stressed, and wanted to believe that someone capable had arrived to help. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a predator with a method. The law exists for a reason. Accountability exists for a reason. An old man with money and grown children is not a resource to be managed by whoever gets there first with the right paperwork. He is a person with rights and history and the full weight of his own life behind him, and those things don't become negotiable because someone decides he might be confused. I am 68 years old. I ran a company for 3.5 decades. I know how to read a schematic and calculate load and understand what a building needs. I know how to hire people and let them go and do both with fairness. I know how to grieve a wife and keep going and find a way to make the second half of a life mean something. What I also know now, more clearly than before, is this. There are people who see aging as an opportunity, who calculate what you've accumulated and how to reach it, who identify the weak points in your life, the estranged child, the financial stress, the isolation. And they move toward those weak points with patience and intention. I know what they look like. I know how they talk. I know the particular warmth they project, the sense they give of being the solution to something you've been carrying. And I know what you do when you encounter them. You pay attention. You ask questions. You insist on your own evaluation, your own lawyer, your own doctor. You do not sign things you have not read. You do not assume that being old means being wrong about what you're seeing. You trust yourself, even when someone tells you, with great concern and apparent kindness, that you can't, especially then. My name is Frank Holloway. I'm a 68-year-old retired electrical contractor, and I'm the man who refused to disappear quietly into someone else's plan for my life. If something like this is happening to you, if someone is telling you that your own perceptions are unreliable, that you need to hand over your decisions, that fighting back will only make things harder, then hear me when I say this. You have rights. You have options. And the fact that you can hear those words and understand them is evidence enough that you haven't lost what they're telling you you've lost. Get a second opinion. Call an elder law attorney. Tell someone you trust what's happening. Don't let anyone convince you that your history and your judgment and your life don't matter simply because you've been alive long enough to have all three. Surviving this wasn't enough for me. I'm still here. I have my house and my accounts and my daughter and the oak tree Carol planted in 1998 that's now 30 feet tall and doesn't owe anyone anything. You deserve that too. Go get it.